is the start of a brand new week. Happy Monday, the second week of January. We are already here, Matt. Matt, a busy weekend across sports world. Of course, UD and Cincinnati men's basketball coming up with big wins. We're getting into all of that. The Bengals win their regular season finale. Put some asterisks by it. It was against the Browns' backups of the backups of the backups. But nonetheless, a good win for the Bengals heading into the offseason for some momentum. Cleveland will head to the wild card round where they will face off and square off against the Houston Texans. And then, of course, tonight, the College Football National Championship. So a lot to talk about on this show. Looking forward for the next couple of hours with you, partner.
Yeah, it's not just something else going on. It's not something that happened over the weekend, but it's something that's happening today. Let everybody know what today is, Jackson.
It is Elvis Presley's would-have-been birthday.
That is not what I was talking about. Talk about the more relevant to us news that is going on today and how somebody got a year older between the two of us.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're older.
I guess I'm older.
You're old. You're old. 3 weeks older than me, but you're old.
Yes, I turned 22 today. So thank you, Matt.
And you guys are gonna have to deal with this 3 weeks exactly from now because my birthday is in
22 in 3 weeks.
I turned 22 in 3 weeks.
And spoiler alert, when Matt turns 22, unlike him, I'm going to sing him the happy birthday song.
Well, you said you were going to intro and kick off and start the show.
We can sing it for myself.
Do we really want to torture everybody's ears that's watching the show right now? Because I personally don't want to put somebody else through the trauma that's going to be me trying to sing happy birthday to you right now.
Only for you. That is exclusively for your birthday.
Sounds like a plan. Hopefully, I'll hear it when it happens, but hopefully the singing is actually somewhat decent and it wouldn't cause people's ears to bleed like it would if I started singing happy birthday right now.
You know, Matt, thank you for the birthday wishes. Thank you for, I know that there's a lot of people, some that watch this show, and a lot of family members, a lot of friends, and, you know, a lot of people have been able to reach out to me over the last, I don't even know how many hours there have been in this day thus far, but I think it's 16 hours, but
16 hours and 2 minutes and however many seconds we are into 4:02.
Yeah, 16 hours. So over the last day, I'll just say that. I'll keep it simple. You know, there's been a lot of people that have been able to reach out to me and they have wished me happy birthdays. And, you know, Matt, I'm extremely blessed. And, you know, I've been here for now 22 years. Kind of hard to believe that I've been here, but year 22 is going to be a big thing. You know, it's going to be a big year, not just for myself, but for your show. And, you know, all glory to the man above. And I'm blessed to be here for another year. And Matt, I'm blessed to be here another year with you. You've been here with me the majority of my life. And hey, we're going to have the same exact conversation 3 weeks from today when we ring in your 22nd birthday as well.
I can officially brag that I'm younger.
The 3 week grace period. Good for you.
I'm more youthful. I've got a 3 week grace period.
The 3 week grace period.
Now.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm going to wave that around like it's a Cleveland Browns flag for the next 3 weeks.
You know, I'll remember this. It's only 3 weeks. It's not that much time that I'll remember it. But I also have been getting older, so I might be more prone to forgetting things.
I hope it wouldn't happen this early.
Nonetheless, busy show upcoming. It was a busy weekend in sports world, and we're going to dive right into it. Matt, how about the UC Bearcats over the weekend? The Bearcats getting a big win over number 12 BYU, and there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of talk now for the Cincinnati Bearcats and that men's basketball team. Matt, you and I, we've talked about them multiple times so far this season on this show. We've talked about how successful they've been. But obviously, in those big games against some of the tougher opponents that they've played, they have not been able to take care of business. They lost against Xavier. They lost big against the UD Flyers. So really, the UC Bearcats, they were kind of getting to a point where they had a good record, but at the same time, it was their strength of schedule that was hindering them. The Bearcats won their first Big 12 game, their first conference game, first game ever playing in the Big 12. Against BYU, the number 12 team in the entire nation on the road. That is a big win. And Matt, that's ultimately a win that can also turn around the Bearcat season and turn around the program in general. There's a lot of people saying that after that win, Bearcats basketball is back in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and it's safe to say when you take a look at the teams around the Ohio area that we continue to talk about needing, not that they need to be ranked, but it feels like with Ohio State, with UC, with UD, with all three of those teams, how much we've talked about them. I mean, even Wright State got a huge win against Purdue Fort Wayne over the weekend as well. They're not much in the conversation for a top 25 team as of right now. But you take a look at UC, you take a look at UD, you take a look at Ohio State. The types of wins that should propel these teams into the top 25, they're slowly starting to pick up those high-quality wins that at some point as the season goes on should be able to propel them into the top 25. I mean, we brought up the conversation last week talking about how the UD Flyers, they just keep winning. They keep beating good teams, and they keep beating good teams convincingly at that. So we keep talking about the UD Flyers, how good their season has been, how we feel, at least myself, you even talked about it a few different times last week, how you feel like it's only a matter of time before the UD Flyers end up being a ranked team. I mean, UC, I can say they're kind of in the same boat. They're kind of in that same conversation as well. You take a look at the season they've put together. Obviously, lost to UD, but outside of that, they've had a phenomenal year so far this year. Then you flip the page over to Ohio State. They did just end up losing to Indiana, but Indiana's a really good team. And then you take a look at the few weeks before that, wins against West Virginia, wins against UCLA, win against Rutgers. It feels like with Ohio State, UD, and UC, it's only going to be a matter of time before these teams, especially Ohio State's got a big game coming up in 2 days against Wisconsin, number 21 in the country right now. If we see Ohio State take down Wisconsin at home, there's even more talking points and more arguments for Ohio State being a top 25 team. But at this moment right now, it just feels like it's only a matter of time for at least one of these three teams that we keep talking about being a top 25 team. I don't know which one of the three it's going to be, because all three really right now I think all three teams have vehement cases to make the top 25, and they have cases to be displayed and shown to the committee and say, hey, this is our resume. We beat some good teams. We've lost to some really good teams too. And that would kind of show that maybe the team should be in the top 25. But for UC, UD, and Ohio State, like I said, I feel like it's only a matter of time before at least one of those three teams cracks into the top 25. And once one of them does, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the rest of the other two teams that aren't in the top 25 first make their way into the top 25 as well.
Yeah, Matt. And we look at Ohio in general, and we talk about how great Ohio is when it comes to basketball. Some of the top high school basketball players come from the state of Ohio. And then you look at some of the collegiate teams and how much success that they've had. And remember, over the last couple of years, it kind of seems as if Ohio has been put on the back burner, and really Xavier. And Xavier, it seems like, Kent State was there last season, but there have not been many teams representing the entire state of Ohio when it comes to the NCAA tournament. Wright State was there a couple of years ago as well. But Matt, when you look at what these teams are doing, and we're going to get into Ohio State here in a little bit. We're going to get into UD here in a little bit as well. We have the first 30 minutes carved out for the show for this, and then we're going to get into all of the NFL talk and all of the college football talk, because that's a lot to talk about as well. We're saving the best for last, so that's one of the reasons why we're pushing it a little bit later. But Matt, when we look at what UC's been able to do, UC, we've talked about them multiple times on this show. And we've always talked about how, yes, they have not played the toughest schedule, but at the same time, what do good teams do against inferior opponents? They beat them how they're supposed to beat them. That's exactly what the Bearcats have done. So there's been no question that the Bearcats have a very successful team. They have a very, very good program. They have a team that can win. You go up against Xavier, you lose by 5. You go up against a very good Dayton team, who we'll get to talking about here in a second, you lose by 14. And then outside of those two teams, yeah, you played Northern Kentucky, yeah, you played Georgia Tech, but there's a lot of schools there that a lot of people, I'm sure, have not heard about them, or it's very limited the amount of times that they've heard about them. And even after that loss against Dayton, the Bearcats, some of the players, the coaching staff, they even came out and said that this team, after losing against Xavier and after losing against Dayton and dropping against ultimately their two bigger rivals here in Southwest Ohio, it hurt their confidence. And there was a lot of what ifs moving forward for the Bearcats. You want to talk about a confidence issue right now for the Bearcats? It's completely through the roof right now. I mean, there is no low confidence right now for Cincinnati. When you take down the number 12 team on the road in the first conference game of the year, not to mention your first game as a Big 12 team ever, you win that 71-60 against the number 12 team in the nation on the road. That's a tough win. And it wasn't like they just edged it out. They were in control for the majority of that game. And that is going to play dividends for the Bearcats moving forward. That is going to play that's going to play a big factor for the Bearcats, not just when it comes to confidence levels, but future recruits that are eyeballing the Cincinnati Bearcats. They're going to see that win. They're going to see that as what is deemed a turning point once again in Bearcats basketball. And as I said, down in Cincinnati, there's a lot of people saying that Bearcats basketball is back. Matt, I certainly would have to agree, but there is one more true test before we can make sure that that statement is true. Tomorrow night, they play number 25 Texas.
Yeah, that'll be another. We talk about tough games for UC. We talked about the first, I think it was 5 or so games of their Big 12 play that they have this year. 4 of those 5 games, I think TCU was the only one that wasn't ranked when we started talking about their starting schedule in the Big 12 earlier on in the season. But I went ahead and looked at ESPN. If you continued on past 25, UD would be 26. UC would be 29. So both of the two teams that we just mentioned, UD and UC, they are pounding at the door to be inside the top 25 right now. UD was 22 votes behind Texas, like you just mentioned, and then UC only got 79 votes to being a top 25 team. UD got 126, Texas got 148. So UD, they're the team right now of all 3 that I mentioned. Ohio State doesn't have any votes for a top 25 team, but you take a look at UD and UC, both of those teams right now are, I wouldn't say they're knocking on the door. They are pounding on the door to being a top 25 team right now. And like I said, if UD and UC continue to have a few more weeks like we've seen the past few weeks for these two teams, it would not shock my mind at all to see, I would even say maybe next week if they play good this week, especially with the fact that, like you mentioned, UC's got Texas. If we see UD run the table this week, if we see UC run the table this week, I wouldn't be surprised if both teams are in the top 25 at this moment next week when they update the standings.
Matt, I completely agree with you. And you know what's crazy is that even last week on this show, Matt, if you recall, we were calling out, maybe they listened to our show or something. Maybe we're a little birdie in the NCAA committee's head, but because we looked at last week and we said that Cincinnati, they weren't even in an honorable mention this time last week. UD was tied for 37th in the entire country. After that win last week against Davidson on the road, Matt, I said on this show, and Matt, you agreed with me as well, and you kind of alluded to this as well, that the UD Flyers are playing like they should be a top 25 team in the entire nation. They got a big win over UMass over the weekend, and now they've bumped up 11 spots from tied from 37th all the way up to 26th. They are 1 game away. If they win out this week, they very well should be in the top 25, and rightfully so, especially if they can win out this week. This is a Flyers team that ultimately, I think, has stunned the entire city of Dayton, at least myself, because a lot of the questions for the Flyers heading into the season were the depth that they had. You lose Malachi Smith in the first game of the season, and your team is facing adversity pretty much right off the bat. And frankly, this is a team that faced adversity at the beginning of last offseason when they had multiple players leave over the offseason. So the Flyers, we're getting into them here a little bit after this break, but that's a team that's faced a lot of adversity. The Bearcats are a team that is trying to claw their way back, and they're a couple spots away from the top 25, but a big win and a big wake-up for all of NCAA basketball that the Bearcats are a team that can be one of the top teams be one of the top 25 teams in the entire country, Matt, just kind of like you and I have been saying all season long. And another team that got a big win that kind of is going to go under the radar, and it's going to go under the radar because this is a team now that it seems like it's too far late in the season, and they're also coming from a conference that it ultimately seems like you have to win that conference to want a chance at March Madness, but the Wright State Raiders. Wright State coming off a big win against Purdue-Fort Wayne over the weekend, just as you mentioned, Matt. And the problem with the Raiders so far this season has been defense. They have one of the best and one of the most explosive offenses in the entire country. Aren't they averaging, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, aren't they averaging 78 points per game?
I don't know exactly the number, but all I know is
high 70s, low 80s. I know that.
The one point I'm going to say about this, talk about how good the offense is, if you're playing against a team that is supposed to win the Horizon League and you put 106 points on them on the road, That tells you all you need to know about the Wright State offense. But to continue on what I know you were going to talk about, the defense being the struggle, they allowed 98 points in that game against Purdue Fort Wayne.
That's not sustainable. And, Matt, we even talked about this last week, and this continues to be the fact that if the Wright State Raiders can figure out that defense, the offense is there. The lowest amount of points that they've put up in a game, they've scored 70 or more points in every single game that they've played this season. They've reached over 100 multiple times. The offense, without a doubt, with Trey Calvin, with Tanner Holden, this is a team, the offense is there 100%. If they can pick up the level of their defense, this is a team that they've lost more in the regular season, but this is a team that can make a run in the Horizon League to find themselves an automatic bid when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And obviously, Matt, we still have over 2 months until all of that really starts to come in fruition. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the Wright State Raiders, very good team. And they don't play like their record shows, but if they can get that defense to the next level, the Raiders can be a scary team as well. It is time for a break. More college basketball talk coming up next when we return to Sports Now.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Back here on Sports Now, Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. We're talking college basketball. Matt, we've already talked about the Bearcats, their big win against BYU. Let's go in and let's start talking about the UD Flyers. The University of Dayton Flyers, we touched base on them. We alluded with them just a couple of minutes ago about how this is a scary team when it comes to all of NCAA college basketball. And Matt, frankly, one of the differences this season from last season with the Flyers is that they're winning the games that they should win. Last season, if you recall, the Flyers would go out and they'd hang with some of the top dogs. They'd win those games. But some of the teams that have come to UD Arena that they should beat, they somehow found a way to lose. This season, it's been a complete 180 for the Flyers. And that speaks highly on what they've been able to do, especially with some of the departures that they faced during the offseason, such as Amzil and Tumani Kamara. And there's so many great players right now for the Flyers. This is a complete team. It all starts with the defensive side, and it can translate to the offensive side. This is a Flyers team that's scary. And Matt, as long as they win out this week, this is a team that has a very good chance of being in the top 25 of the entire nation because they're just the first team outside the top 25 right now, currently at number 26.
And yeah, the only reason they, after this upcoming week, might not be a top 25 team is depending on what happens around the top 25 and the fact that they only have one game this week and it's on Friday. So that what I would say what would be the only reason we might not see this UD Flyers team be a top 25 team at the end of this week is just because they only play one game and it's against a team in Duquesne. It's on the road, but Duquesne, when it comes to the Atlantic 10, they're more towards the bottom of the barrel right now. I believe they are third to last right now in the Atlantic 10, but for UD, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're playing the worst team in the Atlantic 10 or if you're playing the best team in the Atlantic 10. You have to win basketball games. You have to continue, especially when you're a team. Currently, if we were to extend the top 25 by one, you would be that 26th team.
The top 26.
The top 26. Think of it like that. But talking about this UD Flyers team, they just need to keep winning. If this Flyers team keeps winning, and if they can consistently win again, get convincing wins against Atlantic 10 teams, we talked about in the Horizon League, the only shot I would say a team truly has to make it into March Madness would be winning the postseason tournament or would be winning the Horizon League tournament at the end of the regular season. I would say for UD, with the teams they've put on their schedule, with the wins they've stacked up in their favor, one of their two losses on the year is against, I believe, the only undefeated team left in college basketball, that being Houston. Their other loss was a 5-point loss to Northwestern, who's dabbled into the top 25 here and there throughout the season. So you take a look at this UD Flyers team, the teams they've beat, the teams they've lost to. I would say if UD completely runs the gauntlet of the Atlantic 10 and they don't really deal with injuries anymore throughout the remainder of this season, it's totally possible UD, with what season they put together, can make it into March Madness without even having to win the Atlantic 10 tournament.
And, Matt, let's talk about UD in their past, and we talk about some of the injuries that they had to face, and especially if they can stay healthy through the season, I think that everybody in the college basketball world wrote off the University of Dayton Flyers and that men's basketball team after the first game of the season when they did not shoot well and they lost Malachi Smith for the season 5 minutes into the new season. Malachi Smith, that was a huge loss for the Flyers, but the ability to be able to step in and fill the shoes of the loss of Malachi Smith has certainly helped out the Flyers. And it really speaks highly on the coaching staff and what Anthony Grant has been able to do. I mean, we were all talking at the end of last season. We were all talking at the beginning of this season that is Anthony Grant the guy that's going to stay at UD and be the men's basketball coach? Is he entering this season on the hot seat? Whether if he was on the hot seat or not, what he's been able to do with the group he has right now, even without one of his top players in Malachi Smith, I think that there's no question that the players are buying in, the culture is built, the scheme is working, and the Flyers, they're playing their best basketball under Anthony Grant outside of the 2020 team that featured Trey Landers, Obi Toppin, Jalen Crutcher, and a lot of those guys.
And yeah, you take a look at this Flyers team with Malachi Smith going down really early in the year. Game number 1, 7 minutes is all he clocked in this season. So you take a look at what Javon Bennett has been able to do out on the floor. Not super high scoring totals, but he's a top 5 scorer on UD so far, on UD's roster so far this year. And the other player you got to talk about, and you can't give him too much credit because he's done way more than what a lot of people were expecting of him and what a lot of people would expect from a player coming off the bench. Kobe Brea, if not Atlantic 10 Sixth Man of the Year, if he doesn't get that, then I don't know what is going on with the votes. I think he could easily make an argument for Sixth Man of the Year in the entire country for college basketball. I mean, you take a look at what he's been able to do. 0 games started so far this year. He has only come off the bench. He's clocking a ton of time coming off of the bench. 11.4 points a game. That is number 3 on the team. Only 0.7 points a game behind Nate Santos, who, talking about players kind of coming out of the woodworks and kind of coming out of nowhere from what people expected from this Flyers team this year. Nate Santos is definitely one of those players that you take a look at his scoring totals. he's 1 3-pointer away from being back at 50%. He would be at 42 for 84 if he hits another 3 and only shoots 1 3 in their next game coming up against Duquesne. But you just take a look at this team as a whole. Even after another week of basketball, another week of tough basketball playing against Davidson and UMass, 3-point percentage only dropped by .012. It's still above 40% on the season so far this year. So this Flyers team, you talk about teams that a lot of people might not want to be playing right now, and a lot of people, if you do have them on your schedule, you have to play your best basketball against them. The UD Flyers check a lot of those boxes because you've got a solid starting 5 with Deron Holmes, Nate Santos, Kobe Elvis, Javon Bennett, and Enoch Cheeks. All of those players play very good team basketball together. Javon Bennett, Enoch Cheeks, not putting up a ton of points, but they're getting a ton of assists and rebounds as well throughout the game. And then you've got Kobe Brea being your third leading scorer coming off the bench. It's safe to say this Flyers team is scary good at this point of the season. And like I said, all those 6 guys, if we don't see any injuries to those 6 guys throughout this season, I wouldn't be surprised if UD, before the postseason or before the Atlantic 10 tournament, it would not surprise me if this group of guys at UD, before the postseason or before the Atlantic 10 tournament, lock themselves into March Madness without even having to win the Atlantic 10 tournament. That's how good this team is right now.
And Matt, one of UD's, the best trait that they have is they're physical. The best trait that they have, they're physical, they're fast, they're athletic. And when it comes to the sport of basketball, that is the best trait to have, because it doesn't matter how well you shoot on the offensive side of the floor. Now, it's a plus that UD shoots really well on the offensive side of the floor. They can bang home the trifecta. They can drive it inside. They can get it done each and every way that they want to. But, Matt, one thing I enjoy watching UD is how quick and athletic they are in that full court press. When they go to that trap defense, when it goes full court, it makes it very difficult on the opponent, whoever it is, to be able to get it up the floor. Dayton has been able to force multiple turnovers this season. Matt, Dayton right now is averaging 5.6 steals per game. And that's steals per game. That's a hard stat. Their opponents are averaging 10 turnovers a game against the Flyers. And now, I know that those may be a little bit lower than the numbers, but that's for the entire season. When you look at the game against Houston didn't turn over the ball much. When you look at their other loss on the season against Northwestern, they didn't turn over the ball much. When you look back at, I would say probably the last 3 weeks of the season, the Flyers and how many turnovers they have been able to force and how many turnovers they've been able to create has been their strong suit. Because when the ball is free, when they have a fast break opportunity, they can drive inside, they can score on the inside, they can dish it out. This is a team that shoots terrific from beyond the arc as well. And another strength with the Flyers that we've talked about multiple times is that with that play, obviously it's basketball. You're going to have one game where you have, say, for example, Kobe Brea put up 20 points, the next game put up 4. It's basketball. You're going to have up and down streaks like that. But the Flyers, they do not rely on one particular person. They do not rely on one particular aspect of their game. They know if the threes aren't falling, hey, we can get it done on the inside. If you can't get it done on the inside, hey, we can get it done from the mid-range. We can get it done from beyond the arc. We can get it done in different ways. And that is great because as your opponents and as a defense, it is so hard to conspire a game plan to stop the Flyers, because that's where this phrase comes into play. You cannot stop the UD Flyers. You can only limit them because they can find ways to score and find ways to hurt you in so many different ways. And outside of that, there's so many different players that can do it as well. Again, you have Kobe Brea coming off the bench. And as we mentioned, yes, he's coming off the bench. Yes, he's the sixth man. That doesn't mean he's the sixth best player on the team. Coaches usually will put one of their top players on the bench as their sixth man to keep a consistent rotation of some of your top dogs in the game where your starters are on the bench. But you have Kobe Brea, you have Deron Holmes, you have Kobe Elvis, who's really stepped up, Nate Santos. This is a team that has been a joy to watch for the Flyers. The city of Dayton has been treated with some really good basketball lately, and there is still a lot of basketball to be played. Big game against Duquesne, but Matt, as I said it before, this is a Flyers team that, in my opinion, I truly believe that this is the best Flyers team we've seen since the 2020 team that their season obviously ended in result of COVID.
And yeah, I would say it's going to be tough for a UD Flyers team. I could be completely wrong when I say this, and I hope at some point I end up being proven wrong. It's going to be tough for really any Flyers team to be better than that 2020 team we saw, because obviously, like you said, March Madness didn't happen because of COVID-19. But a lot of the projections of what the tournament would have ended up resulting in, a lot of them had UD winning the national championship in their projections and in their predictions of the tournament. There's another player on this roster we keep talking about, the starting five, and then Kobe Brea. How about the year Isaac Jack has put together so far this year? Only 9.6 minutes a game, 7 blocks on the season. That's number 3 on the team. 80% field goal percentage on the season. He's 21 for 26, and he's also doing a pretty decent job rebounding the basketball with the fact that he's only on the floor for 10 minutes a game. So we keep talking about all of the top 6 or so players for this UD Flyers team, but when you got another big man in Isaac Jack who can rebound the ball underneath and give Deron Holmes some rest, and he's only missing 20% of his shots. He's making 80% of the shots he takes on the season. We keep talking about all of the big scoring players and all of the key pieces to this UD Flyers team. I'll tell you what, Isaac Jack is also a big piece of this team too, because when Deron Holmes needs some time to rest, when Nate Santos needs some time to rest, the two bigger rebounding players on this UD Flyers team, you throw Isaac Jack out there, let him run around for about 5 to 10 minutes, call a timeout after you think that Deron Holmes might be back and ready to go, or Nate Santos might be back and ready to go. Isaac Jack will probably get you 4 points. He'll come off the floor, and you've got a fully refreshed Deron Holmes or a fully refreshed Nate Santos to go back out on that floor. So talking about the top 6 players for this UD Flyers team, that doesn't take into account all the players that we see. I mean, Pedigimus is another player that comes to mind when it comes to players that come off the bench that do and play phenomenally. Napier, another player that does well coming off the bench. They're not the highest scoring players coming off the bench in college basketball, but they're not the flashiest players coming off the bench in college basketball. But that's another thing about this Flyers team. You at the start of the year were questioning what's the bench going to be like? How good are the not second string players, but how good are the bench players for UD going to play this year? I think it's safe to say the Flyers bench so far this year, obviously, Kobe Brea is the shining star from the bench for UD, but it hasn't just been Kobe Brea that's come off and done phenomenally. Isaac Jack, he's done good coming off the bench. Pedigimus has done good coming off the bench. Their stats don't pop off the page, or they aren't the best stats you're ever going to see from a player coming off the bench. But when you're in those downtimes and when you're in those moments where you need Nate Santos to go you need Nate Santos to go to the bench and recover a little bit and refresh himself and get ready to go back out on the floor. Same can be said for Deron Holmes. Same can be said for Kobe Elvis, Javon Bennett. If any of those players need some time to rest and recover and get ready to go back out on the floor and kind of recuperate themselves if they're getting really gassed on the floor, the Flyers have a good bench to get on the floor. It's not going to be a group of players coming off the bench that are going to absolutely demolish whoever they're playing, but they get the job done and they keep the game consistent between both sides of the ball. On the offense and defensive sides, when you see some of the bench players come in for UD, such as Isaac Jack, such as CJ Napier, such as Petros Pedigimus, when you see those guys come onto the floor, you don't get as high of production, but you still get some pretty high production from the UD Flyers on the floor.
It is time for a break, but Matt, real quick before we go to a break, we're going to have to go back to every single one of our shows. We're going to have to make a compilation of awful takes that we've come up with because we talk about the announcer's jinx. It is real. I am a firm believer that the announcer's jinx is real, and there has been so many times that things have not been going a team's way. We call them out for it, and it completely turns around their season. Couple examples. I remember back on one of our first show, I said that the Ravens were the most overrated team in all of football. Ever since then, I think that they lost one game. And that was back in week 5 when I said that, when they were 3-2. We both said that the Bengals defense has a chance to be a top 10 defense in all of the NFL. After we said that, they had one of the worst defenses in the entire National Football League.
Can I guess why you're bringing this up? Are you bringing it up because Marquette lost to Seton Hall?
That too, but I was also going to this as well. I was going as I question the Flyers and their bench. Shame on me, because that is a very, very good team. That is a very, very good bench, and they are very, very well coached. And the Flyers, they may be the real deal, but now since I said that, I'm sorry.
You should just stop talking. I'm a UD fan. Stop talking.
You're right. I'm a UD fan too. To help my team. Time for a break. We'll be back.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. We welcome you back to Sports Now. Time 4:38 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's get into some NFL action. Yesterday was the last day of the regular season across the National Football League, and we have officially hit time for the playoffs. 14 teams are alive to win Super Bowl 58. We have some great teams that are still in there, and 3 teams in the AFC North. The lone team that was out was the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you were to tell, Matt, if you were to tell me that at the beginning of the season, I don't think I would have believed you. But at the same time, the Bengals, obviously, just an injury-plagued season and just simply not their season. You could tell that they lost some pieces on defense. They were very young on the defensive side of the football. The schemes weren't necessarily there. And with all the injuries that they had, I mean, Joe Burrow, the star quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, was only healthy in 5 of the games this season. He had the calf injury at the beginning of the year. Then he was knocked out for the entire season. Week 11 against the Baltimore Ravens on that Thursday Night Football. Jake Browning came in and made a deep run. And I know that there's a lot of frustration right now through a lot of Cincinnati fans. But at the same time, you played in it, and you played meaningful football all the way up through 17 weeks of the season. With how many injuries you had, with how much adversity you were able to face, you were able to end it on a strong note, beating the Browns. I don't care if it was the third or fourth or I mean, with all the injuries the Browns have had, probably the fifth or sixth stringers for the
It was the fifth different starting quarterback the Browns had thrown on the field this year.
So, I mean, even though the Browns were resting, and as they should, the Browns, they deserved that rest time. They clinched the 5 seed. It was a meaningless game for them. It should have been a rest game for Cleveland. But at the end of the day, no matter if Cincinnati played as many starters as they had left, I think it was very important for Cincinnati to get that win, finish above 500, and have some confidence heading into the offseason. And not only that, Cincinnati clutches up, and the AFC North is the first division since 1935 to have every single team over 500. Wild.
That is crazy.
And what's crazy is that the Bengals finished in the cellar at 9-8. You go to the AFC South and you go to the NFC South, your division winners were 9-8. It just speaks highly on the amount of talent that's played in the AFC North. And ultimately, every single team that played in the AFC North this season was a talented team and a tough team to beat. 3 teams in the AFC North making the playoffs. And I don't think that we could speak how highly on the AFC North, because the AFC North in general is the best division in all of football. But Matt, kind of circling back to the Bengals, disappointing season, and with all the hype that Cincinnati had heading into this season, they had a lot more they had some of their players, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, they had all the veteran presence, and ultimately heading into this season, we felt like for the Cincinnati Bengals, it was Super Bowl or bust. It was Super Bowl or it was going to result in a disappointing season. This was the most hype in Bengals history for a season, and it fell completely short of the goal, and ultimately the most disappointing season I would say in Bengals history. But at the end of the day, with all the adversity, Zach Taylor, the coaching staff, did a great job adjusting, changing the scheme to fit Jake Browning. Great coaching staff. They're 9-8. They finish on a high note. They're entering the offseason, a long offseason, to try to get things going in the right direction, try to get back to the roster that they need to have to win a championship. Matt, in my opinion, I do think that we're going to see the Bengals once again in that Super Bowl AFC mix next season, as long as they stay healthy.
And yeah, apparently this year, at least during the regular season, and I hope it doesn't continue for the Browns in the postseason, but apparently the phrase or the motto of teams in Ohio was get as hurt as possible. It felt like this year. Talking about all the injuries for the Bengals, it's obvious that played a factor into how Cincinnati missed the playoffs this year. And me being a Browns fan, I am still kind of shocked that with how many injuries the Browns have, the Browns made it into the playoffs.
Their run has been absolutely crazy, and I'll go out there and say this right now, that the Cleveland Browns, there is no other team across the National Football League, and it does not even come close. It does not even come close. There is no other team across the National Football League that has faced more adversity than the Cleveland Browns, and for them to finish as the 5 seed in the AFC, it truly speaks highly, not just on the players who had to step up, not just on the ownership, and I can't believe we're saying that about the Cleveland Browns, talking about how great their ownership was this season, but their general manager being able to add the pieces that they needed to continue to contribute to try to get to the playoffs, such as they did. And I think that this is the biggest reason why the Browns were successful this season. Matt, this was a coach that was heading into the season who I think was more on the hot seat. Because the Browns, he started off his tenure with a playoff trip for the Browns, back-to-back years where they missed. This was a year for the Browns and for Kevin Stefanski that it was a pretty much, in my opinion, a do-or-die year for him. And he rose to the occasion. And not only did he rise to the occasion, he exceeded the occasion. Cleveland's back in the playoffs, 11-6. And with how much adversity that team fought through, there is no doubt unanimously that I believe that Kevin Stefanski should be the coach of the year.
And yeah, I
don't know who else can compete with him.
I would say maybe Harbaugh might be in a conversation for coach of the year with how good the Ravens have looked. Maybe Shanahan as well with how good the 49ers have looked so far this season too. But like I said, going into the game against the Jets, 26% of the Browns cap space was on IR going into that game. And that was 2 weeks ago. It's crazy to know that the Browns had that much hurt on the team at this point of the season. And we're talking about this team being the best of the wild card teams in the AFC, or at least the highest seeded and the best seeded wild card team inside of the AFC. Talking about this Browns team, they've got a very, 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 very tough test in a CJ Stroud-led Houston Texans team upcoming, and I believe it's the 4:30 game, the very first game on Saturday. The very first postseason game of the year will be Browns-Texans, but that's going to be the one thing for Cleveland in this game too. They beat the Texans when they didn't have CJ Stroud. The question's going to be, how is this Browns team going to perform playing against CJ Stroud? Because obviously the score at the end of the day was a little bit closer than it ever should have been. The Browns were up very, very, I believe it was 36-7 at some point during the game. If it wasn't 36-7, it was 28-7, something along those lines. The Browns were dominant, and the only touchdown the Texans had was a kick return touchdown by Dameon Pierce. So this Browns team, obviously, like I said, it is a completely different animal with C.J. Stroud at the helm of that offense. So I think this playoffs with Browns-Texans, it's going to be a really, really, really good game to kick off the playoffs this year for the NFL.
It's going to be great. And we actually have received a couple of comments from Timothy Powell. Tim, thank you for the birthday wishes. And he also brought up a great point. Texans head coach for Coach of the Year as well. Certainly think that he could be in the conversation as well. I mean, what D'Amico Ryans was able to do for the Houston Texans in that organization, certainly in the conversation. But I'm looking mainly at the fact of the adversity and how many quarterbacks the Browns went through. And not just quarterbacks. You lose your star running back and who's arguably the best running back in all of the National Football League in week 2 for the entire season. Look at how banged up that offensive line was. Look how banged up that defense got down the stretch. I mean, Amari Cooper was banged up all season long. And you bring in a quarterback that was on his couch for the entire season, and he plays like he's the next Tom Brady. It's just absolutely been insane what the Cleveland Browns have been able to do so far this season. And, maybe it's a little bit of luck, but who cares? They're in the playoffs. I mean, they're 11-6, and this is truly a team that can make a postseason run. And this is a team, this is a team that has Cleveland feeling a certain way, and a certain way that I don't think that they felt all the way since the 1950s. I mean, Cleveland, with what they have right now, they have something special, and this has been the most special year in all of Cleveland, and I'm not going to say all of Cleveland sports history, but all of the Cleveland Browns history. This is a very good team, and I truly enjoy watching them play. This is a team that can make some noise in the playoffs. Matt, let's circle back real quick and let's talk a little bit about the Bengals, because now they're heading into the offseason. We're talking a little bit more about the Browns later on when we'll talk about the Browns a little bit more later on when we go into the AFC playoffs and the NFC playoffs as a whole a little bit later in hour number 2 of our show. But Matt, let's go in to talk about, before we get a break, some of what to expect the Cincinnati Bengals to do in the offseason. Obviously, there's a lot of contracts that are up for the Bengals. Tyler Boyd, he's at the end of his contract. T. Higgins is at the end of his contract. Chidobe Awuzie is at the end of his contract. DJ Reader's at the end of his contract. Jonah Williams is at the end of his contract. There's Jamar Chase is coming and approaching due for a new contract. He's going to be year 4. Obviously, he was a first-round pick. He's got that 5th-year option, but expect him maybe to start some negotiations this year to see if they can get him long-term. There's going to be a lot of turnover on this team for the Cincinnati Bengals. And as I said a couple weeks ago in this show, Cincinnati, this is a team that their Super Bowl window has closed on the current team that they have. But with $88 million in cap space and with all these players that are up for free agency, the Bengals can continue to go make a splash in free agency and reopen that Super Bowl window as early as next season. And especially with quarterback like Joe Burrow, who even has come out and said the window for a Super Bowl is his entire season. Cincinnati, this is a team that this is a very important offseason, not just for next year, but for the future and the entire future of this program. I'd like to see them get some more veteran depth on the defensive side. You got to kind of pick and choose what you need for your offensive players. T. Higgins, obviously, he's eligible for the tag. Jonah Williams as well. It's tough to find offensive line help, and ever since he switched to the right tackle, he's been a very underrated offensive lineman for Cincinnati. A lot of decisions to come for Cincinnati, but again, if this offseason is run correctly, we could see a roster turnover. We could see the Bengals right back in the thick of things next season. If they don't run this offseason correctly, at the end of the day, it's going to be a tough couple of years for the Cincinnati Bengals.
And yeah, there's one player that you listed off that I think, and if the announcer's jinx plays a factor, then I'm totally sorry that it ended up happening, but I don't see Jamar Chase going anywhere other than staying in Cincinnati. I mean, you take a look at the connection he has with Joe Burrow. I mean, they played college football together for quite some time down in LSU, and the type of friendship, and I would say kind of brothership that they have between each other in the NFL, it's obvious those two like playing football together. I would be completely shocked if we see Jamar Chase, even throughout a majority, if not his entire career, in anything other than a Cincinnati Bengals uniform, inside of a Cincinnati Bengals jersey. I think of all those players, obviously, you talked about, what was it, $82 million in cap space?
I believe it's 88.
It's in the 80s. We'll put it at that. It's
quite a bit. They have the fifth most cap space from any other team in the National Football League. And when you are the first team to miss the playoffs of the entire NFL and you have the fifth most cap space, you got a lot of money to work with. And once again, thanks for all the kind comments, Timothy Powell. But you look at it, he's given some of his decisions, mentions T. Higgins more than likely will get the franchise tag, which I completely agree with. I think that the Bengals are at a point right now where it's going to be tough for Cincinnati to be able to re-sign T. Higgins long-term, but you get him on a tag because you want to keep him. He's the kind of player that you want to keep him around as long as possible. He's that good. But at the same time, Joe Burrow is going to do Joe Burrow things. And Joe Burrow is one of those quarterbacks that's not going to need much help with his receiving core. But at the same time, when you have a player like T. Higgins on your team, you try to keep him as long as you can. And I would like to see the Bengals maybe try to re-sign him in the future because he's been nothing more than a class act for Cincinnati. And when he's on the field, he's a difference maker. So that's certainly probably the biggest headline, not just for the Bengals, but for the entire NFL entering this offseason, because he hits the free agent market and the Bengals don't tag him, or say the Bengals don't re-sign him and they let him walk. He's going to be one of the top free agents in this free agent class. And then again, you look at the defensive side of the football, number one on the defensive side. And I think that this is the first issue that the Bengals have got to address at all. I think that they have got to find a way to get another pass rusher, a couple of pass rushers. That defensive line outside of Trey Hendrickson this season was atrocious. They could not stop the run, and a lot of that also goes to linebacker play. It seemed like Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson struggled. I expect them to hopefully step up their game again next season. But you look at the defensive line, you had zero pass rush outside of Trey Hendrickson. That is a problem. You look at Pittsburgh, they have a great pass rush all through that defensive line. You look at San Francisco, they have multiple pass rushers on that defensive line. You look at the top teams in all of the National Football League. They're not just carried by one. They're not just carried by one pass rusher. Yes, there's going to be your sack leader that's going to stand out more than the rest. But the Bengals, they had Trey Hendrickson, and outside of Hendrickson, they had zero pass rush. They've got to go invest some money in a heavy pass rush, especially with how pass heavy the NFL is today. And then there's a lot of question right now with the young secondary that Cincinnati has. The cornerback play, you could definitely tell the difference when Cam Taylor-Britt is on the field and when Cam Taylor-Britt is off the field. But I'm looking at the safety position. Jordan Battle played a great rookie season. In fact, I got some stats here on my phone I'm going to pull up for Jordan Battle. Remember, Jordan Battle, he took over. His first game that he officially started was, I believe it was week 12 against Pittsburgh. That's when Lou Anarumo mentioned that Jordan Battle was going to be playing the majority of the snaps over Nick Scott. Ever since then, he is Pro Football Focus's fifth highest safety grade from any rookie over the last 10 years. And what Jordan Battle was able to do, 71 tackles, an interception, and 2 sacks. You do that where you only started a third of the season, you have a bright future in the National Football League. Dax Hill, on the other hand, I love the way he's been able to fly around. I think Dax Hill, there's a lot of hate going towards him right now that's uncredited. He's an athlete. He can fly, he can make plays, but the question is, he definitely gets burnt deep quite a lot. Do the Bengals bring in a veteran safety presence and rotate him with Dax Hill? Or could we even see Dax Hill maybe playing a nickel cornerback or a slot cornerback with Mike Hilton next season? Maybe Dax Hill's out of position. A lot of decisions on that defensive side for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, a lot of decisions on the defensive side, but one area that We've talked about quite a few times that I think the Bengals they definitely need to try to address this issue, and you've talked about it so many different times, Jackson, I can't count it on one hand, but the tight end position for the Cincinnati Bengals. You take a look at what Uzomah did for Cincinnati and what he was able to do with the Jets, then Hurst going from Cincinnati to Carolina. Obviously, both of those tight ends going to teams that don't have the flashiest of offenses in the NFL, but when you've got Uzomah playing phenomenally in Cincinnati, going to the Jets, not doing nearly as well. You've got Hayden Hurst going from Cincinnati after he had a phenomenal year for the Bengals, going to the Carolina Panthers. It was a little bit of an injury-prone year this year, but nowhere near the production when he was healthy than when he was with Cincinnati. So talking about this Bengals team, talking about things they need to try to improve on and they need to try to fix, tight end position, I wouldn't say it is the end-all, be-all. That is where they need to 110% hammer at this season. But when you take a look at what the tight end position has done in Cincinnati, I would even say before Joe Burrow was around, Tyler Eifert, how dominant was he in a Bengals uniform when he played for Cincinnati? There have been so many tight ends in Cincinnati, I would say throughout the past 10 plus years, that the position, I wouldn't say that Cincinnati has had the best tight ends in the NFL, but they've meant so much to the offense. You have a season like this year. Obviously, Joe Burrow wasn't healthy for a majority of the year, but you take a look at the tight end position for the Bengals this year, there were a few and far between when it came to very high production from the tight ends in Cincinnati. And when there was really good production from the tight ends, you had 3 different tight ends rotating in and out of the position as the game was going on. So talking about this Bengals team, I wouldn't say it is, like I said, I wouldn't say it is the end-all, be-all. They don't get this. There's no chance for this team to do any good next year. But I would say for Cincinnati, a solid, consistent tight end, talking about some of the struggles the offense had seen at some points during this year, you get that solid, consistent tight end, that takes away a decent chunk of the middle of the field. The defenders are going to have to respect that area of the field. Who does that leave open? Or who does that leave with less coverage against them? Jamar Chase, and if T. Higgins comes back, T. Higgins. Those are 2 players with less coverage on them. The defense better find a way to try to stop it. Otherwise, we're going to see more games where Jamar Chase gets 11 catches for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns.
And, not to mention the fact that the Bengals over the last couple of years, obviously Hayden Hurst, C.J. Uzomah, you see what they've done when they've left Cincinnati. Burrow is a quarterback that will make your tight end, and the Cincinnati Bengals have a system where tight ends can thrive in the system no matter who they are. And I really do love the emergence of Tanner Hudson and what he was able to provide the Bengals offense really the second half of the season. And the question is, can he be that guy? He's a little older. I believe his contract is also up. You could re-sign him more than likely for cheap, but at the same time, you look at Lamar Jackson, he's got a Mark Andrews. You look at Brock Purdy, he has a George Kittle. You look at Patrick Mahomes, he's got Travis Kelce. You look at the top teams in the entire National Football League, and those quarterbacks have a top tight end in the league. We see the addition to Sam Laporta in Detroit and immediately took an impact on that offense, and that offense looked night and day difference from what it was a season ago when Detroit missed the playoffs. The Bengals, I would like to see them pursue a tight end in the draft. This draft, I've said it before, this draft is filled and loaded with tight ends that could certainly help that Cincinnati offense, and especially with a possible loss of Tyler Boyd, your slot receiver, you need to find a way to replace somebody who can spread the middle of the field, and a tight end is a perfect way to do so. Time for a break. It's 4:58 p.m. Eastern Time. When we return, hour number 2 of this 2-hour show upcoming. We'll talk a little bit more Bengals. We're getting into some more Browns talk, and we'll also talk about the upcoming NFL Playoff Super Wildcard Weekend kicking off this Saturday. Hard to believe we're already this late in the football season. And we're already in 2024. That's just wild to me.
It's insane.
It's quiet. It's time flies when you're having fun. And Matt, I must have fun with you every day because it is
fun. I will say this much: it is fun.
Time for a break. We'll be back.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi!
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi!
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington and the entire TKDS Sports Network crew. Just another reminder, make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. Myself on Twitter at Jackson Lightcap. Matt over there at MPennington88. Up in the top right corner, it is at TKDS Sports. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube as well. And Matt, not to mention, we had a new show drop today, and this is one of the reasons why everybody out there should want to follow the TKDS Sports Network on all social media pages. TKDS Sports Network, they have dropped their first new show of 2024 earlier this morning. We'll get into that here in just a second. And there are more new shows on its way and more shows to come. Watch it all live right here, just like Sports Now at TKDS Sports. So, Matt, the first new show for the TKDS Sports Network in 2024, What the Puck? It's a hockey show hosted by our very own Caleb Spinner. Caleb will also be joining us Tuesdays and Thursdays on this show, 4:30 to 5. Now, I did not curse. It is
That is the name of the show.
That's the show. It is What the Puck, as in hockey puck. So I don't want to get in any trouble for saying that on air.
Jackson, you said a bad word, man.
Because I did not
What are
say
you
a bad word.
doing?
It is puck as in hockey puck, but it's hosted by your very own Caleb Spinner. Monday, Wednesdays, and I believe Fridays, 10 a.m. to 11:30. Check it out on the TKDS Sports Network for all you hockey lovers out there as well.
And yeah, I don't know if you're watching, Caleb, but to be honest, for the hour or so that I got to meet you last week, that name does not surprise me whatsoever. That name is, it's just me with that goofy humor. That name is perfect. Don't change it. Doesn't need to be changed because it's funny. I like those kinds of names. I heard that and I'm like, dude, that is amazing, and it makes sense that it's Caleb's show.
It's certainly clever, and if you get to know Caleb, it makes sense.
The reason I like it so much is because that's my kind of humor and goofiness.
Speaking of that, if for all those people out there that want to get to know Caleb, we mentioned last week he's going to be helping us out on Sports Now. He'll be joining us Tuesdays and Thursdays. Time still to be determined. We're thinking it'll be 4:30 to 5 p.m. So starting tomorrow. So excited to have him on. We'll be talking some Ohio State sports, athletics, basketball, football, and more. A lot of connections there. That's where he graduated. So looking forward to that tomorrow. Matt, let's move on real quick and let's start taking a look at the entirety of the NFL playoffs upcoming. We've talked about the Browns and Texans and kind of alluding on that a little bit more. Obviously, the Browns, they went to Houston. They absolutely destroyed the Houston Texans just a couple of weeks ago on New Year's Eve. The Texans, though, were without C.J. Stroud, and you could tell that they were without C.J. Stroud. And the question that I have is, what will C.J. Stroud being back for the Houston Texans do to the Cleveland Browns? Will that turn that game into more of a shootout? Will the Houston defense find a way to stop Joe Flacco and the Browns offense and not allow Amari Cooper to have a record-breaking and a record-setting day? A lot of what-ifs heading into this situation, but Cleveland and Houston, I think that's got all the makings to be a great, tremendous game for the first game to kick off the 2024 NFL playoffs.
And yeah, I think C.J. Stroud being able to suit up for this game for Houston is going to make this game a lot more entertaining than the score. You might not think that it was too much of a blowout for the Cleveland Browns, but you take a look at how Houston was able to put up, I think it was 22 points in that game against Cleveland. I think it was 36-22 final. The Houston Texans got a kick return for their first touchdown, and their other 2 touchdowns in that game came against the Browns' second-string defense. So to me, as I was watching that game too, being a Browns fan, I was like, here we go again. I was thinking of Joe Flacco for the Jets last year against the Cleveland Browns and how the Browns were ahead convincingly in that one, led up a touchdown. Onside kick goes the way of the Jets, and then they were able to score Joe Flacco to Garrett Wilson to end up giving the Jets the lead. In the game against Houston, I don't know if I'm 100% right on this, but Houston got a touchdown, and I'm pretty sure they got the onside kick immediately after that. So I was kind of getting some flashbacks to the game against the Jets. But to me, I think C.J. Stroud suiting up for this game against the Browns, it's going to help Houston a ton. But I feel like the Browns are also going to be able to hold on enough to be able to take down the Houston Texans. I might just be saying that because I'm a Browns fan, but with how dominant the win was for the Cleveland Browns against Houston, like I said, the score is a little bit closer than a dominant win would be, but kick return touchdown and then 2 touchdowns against the Browns' backup defense. Obviously, without C.J. Stroud, those numbers are going to change, but at the end of the day, that's just dominance by Cleveland on the offense and defensive side of the ball. I don't think Amari Cooper is going to have another 250-plus receiving yard game in their game against Houston coming up this Saturday. But I do feel like the Browns, and he's having a ton of fun playing football. You're seeing it from the players around him. When I forget exactly which game it was. I know it wasn't the game against the Rams, but it might have been the game against the Bears. You have a brand new quarterback in the system who's only been around for not even a month. He was giving a post-game speech after the game. The entire locker room was dead silent. Not a noise coming from anybody, and the only noise that was coming from anybody were people cheering on Joe Flacco as he was giving his little post-game speech at the end of the game. When you have that much, I wouldn't say control over the locker room, but when you have that much respect from players who have played against you when you played for the Baltimore Ravens, and you kicked their tail pretty much every time you played them, to then being the new starting quarterback in Cleveland, when you're able to have that kind of respect from the players on the Browns, that says all that's all you need to know about how this Browns team is feeling right now, how confident this Browns team is. When you've got a quarterback who had only been elevated from the practice squad 2 to 3 weeks prior, and only just got off his couch a month and a half ago, that tells you all you need to know about Joe Flacco and what this Cleveland Browns team is going to bring to the table this postseason. They are going to be a team that no matter what level of adversity they face, if they're down 20 points at any point in the postseason, or if they're up by 20 points at any point in the postseason, this team is going to continue to fight, and they're going to continue to give it everything they've got.
Matt, the main question that I have for Cleveland, and I think that this is a valid question asking not just the Cleveland Browns, but any team right now who rested their starters in Week 18. Will that week off play a factor in their rhythm? Because the Browns and a lot of other teams were in rhythm and they rested their starters in Week 18. And I bring up the Browns because that's who we're talking about right now. Remember the Texans, they weren't even clinched in Week 18. So they had to play all of their starters in a must-win game against the Indianapolis Colts. It was practically already a playoff game for the Houston Texans, whereas the Browns were able to rest. Now, you could look at it this way. The Browns, they're more rested to face the Houston Texans, but you can look at this this way. The Texans have kept their momentum where the Browns rested and may have lost that. And that's really the question that we need to ask ourselves in this game, and you can also talk about a couple of other games in the playoffs, especially on the NFC side. Will these bye weeks for these players create a lull in when they come back for the playoffs? We see it in every single major sport in the United States. And I'm not going to say it's happening to the Browns, but it's a question that you need to ask the Browns-Texans game. And I'm using it as an example, but there's also a lot of other teams and a lot of other games out there that you can ask the same question. Same thing with the Chiefs-Dolphins game that's going to be played the late night on Saturday night. When the Ravens and the 49ers come back, because those are going to be teams that have starters that are off 2 weeks of rest because they didn't play Week 18 and then they got the first round bye. So I'm not just saying this from a Cleveland perspective. I'm keeping this as a whole, but that is a question that we need to ask ourselves. And this could be a situation where we see the Browns and the Texans. Could that play a factor? I think it could. Will it happen? I don't know. That's up in the air, and that's why you got to play the game on Saturday.
And yeah, I think obviously it might end up playing a factor, but for the Cleveland Browns, I don't really think it's going to play too much of a factor because you talk about resting your starters, having that week off. The Browns had a week off earlier on in the year. Guess who they beat out of that bye week? Mm-hmm. The number 1 seed in the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers. Granted, that field goal should have been good at the end of the game, and the Browns should have lost 20-19. But the Browns won the game 19-17, playing against the number 1 team in the NFC at the end of the regular season. I'm not saying that what happened back around week 5 or 6 of the season is going to translate to the Browns resting their starters and having to play a game against the Cincinnati Bengals, but I think it's safe to say, at least from a Cleveland standpoint, and that wasn't even with Joe Flacco, and that wasn't with the team was energetic at that time because they were playing pretty good football at around that time of the season, but they weren't as energetic as they are now, having Joe Flacco being their quarterback, and it seems like, I wouldn't say the entire team is rejuvenated and super happy, but the team's definitely happy having Joe Flacco around. So talking about, at least from the Cleveland Browns side of things, I don't think it's going to affect them too much having that week off. I think it's going to be, for the Cleveland Browns, another week to rest, or a week to rest to get yourself ready for the run you're about to need to make in the postseason and the run that you're going to have to try to make to get to the Super Bowl. Because the Browns, to make it to the Super Bowl, you are going to have to play some pretty good teams. You have to play Houston, obviously. You're probably going to have to play it. I don't know exactly who, if they win, they're going to end up playing in the next round, because when it comes to teams switching around who they're going to play, the 4 and 5 seed are usually the ones that are moving around the most, because you see an upset with a 6 seed, then that means the Browns are going to play Buffalo if they beat Pittsburgh. Or if you see Pittsburgh win over Buffalo, that means, well, if Pittsburgh wins over Buffalo, that means the Browns play either Miami or Kansas City. But when it comes down to, especially with it being the first game of the playoffs too, you don't know who you're going to play the next round of the postseason. We could see Kansas City and Buffalo win, then you got Baltimore in round 2. It doesn't matter who you're playing, though. You're playing a postseason team, and you're playing a team that made it into the postseason in the NFL on the AFC side of in the AFC. So for the Browns, I think the technical bye week that they had last week, resting all of their starters, I think that's only going to get them even more ready for the game against Houston, because obviously Houston's feeling pretty confident taking down the Colts 23-19 in their final regular season game to punch their ticket into the postseason. But you also have to take into account, too, the Texans have less time to recover now than the Browns did to get ready for their first postseason game of the year, and that's going to be something that could end up playing a factor. Houston only having this week to recover and get themselves ready for their game this Saturday. The Browns, their entire starting team, the entire starting roster has had since not last Thursday, but the very last Thursday night football game of the season against the Jets. So the Browns, not just did they play a Sunday game and then have another Sunday game this week to rest, the Browns also have another 3 extra days as well to rest and get themselves ready for this postseason. So for Cleveland, I think the Browns, especially because the fact that they had that extended week going into Bengals week yesterday, I think a mix of that and the fact that we've already seen what the Browns coming out of a bye week have done this year. They took down the number 1 team in the NFC right now. I think that's going to not show exactly what this Browns team is going to be coming off of a very extended break for their starters. But I think this Browns team is going to be coming out firing on all cylinders on the offensive and defensive sides of the football.
A lot of great and excellent points there made by the great Matty P.
I hope they were good points.
Time for a break. We're going to go further into detail about the AFC playoffs coming up next when we return.
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Welcome back to Sports Now, 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Happy Monday. It's Monday.
It's not just Monday.
It's my birthday.
There you go.
I don't know if it's good to have your birthday on a Monday because you start the week. It's still a Monday, but it's also a good day. It's a better day, because it's your birthday.
Thanks for making me feel good when my birthday's in 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
On Monday.
I'm singing to you on the show. Everybody plug their ears.
All I know
it's going to be a
is-
little happy birthday. Prelude.
All I know is the fact that you're like, I don't know if it's good having a birthday on a Monday. Thanks for saying that 3 weeks before my birthday.
I think it is. It makes Mondays a little bit better.
It
does make Mondays better.
It'll make this
You
Monday.
just don't want to look into what's upcoming in the week.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, Matt, the NFL playoffs will kick off this Saturday. Hard to believe that we're already here at playoff time. 32 teams in the NFL have been shaved down to 14 teams fighting for Super Bowl 58 and the Lombardi Trophy. Matt, let's spend the next couple of minutes and let's talk a little bit about the AFC. Obviously, the 1 seed, the Baltimore Ravens, winning the AFC North. They are going to be the 1 seed. They're not playing this week. We're going to see the 2 seed, the Buffalo Bills, take on the 7 seed, the Pittsburgh Steelers in Buffalo. 3 seed, the Kansas City Chiefs will take on the Miami Dolphins, the 6 seed. And then we just talked about the Browns and the Texans, the 5 and the 4 seed. Matt, I'll be honest with you. The most dominant team that I see right now in the entire AFC has got to be the Buffalo Bills and what they've been able to do over their last month and a half of the season. This is a team that I believe started 5-6, if I'm not mistaken. This is a team that was below 500 early in the season. They went on a long winning streak, and the Miami Dolphins, you got to feel bad for Dolphins fans out there because the Miami Dolphins, who were in complete control and at one point had a 3-game lead in the AFC East, was leading the division all year long. From the beginning of the year to last night, they were on top of the AFC East, and out of nowhere, here come the Buffalo Bills, and the Buffalo Bills take down the Miami Dolphins, and the Buffalo Bills now are your AFC East champions. And it just seemed like back in November, when the Bills were going through their struggles, this was a team that everybody counted out. But Matt, here they are. They're the number 2 team in the entire postseason. And Matt, I'll go out there and say it again. I've said it once, I'll say it again. The Buffalo Bills right now are the most dominant team in the AFC. And although it just seems like everybody's counted them out, but this is a team that can put up a fight. This is a team that you could start talking about possibly being Super Bowl contenders once again.
And yeah, this Bills team, they started out, they weren't 5-6, they were 5-5, then went to 6-6 after Eagles and then Jets back-to-back weeks. So this team, it's safe to say, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. When you take a look at the overall record of this Bills team right now, you mentioned the fact that obviously earlier on in the season there was a lot of struggles with this Buffalo Bills team, but when you take a look at the fact that overall right now, they sit at 11-6, 5-game win streak to end the regular season. One of those wins was against Miami to win you the AFC East last night. So this Bills team, I was going to say it myself that I thought that they were one of the best looking teams in the NFL right now. I would say themselves, arguably one of the best teams right now when it comes to the eye test in the NFL. I'd say Cleveland ticks off some of those boxes. Baltimore obviously ticks off a ton of those boxes when it comes down to best looking teams. The 49ers, you can say, are in the conversation for one of the best looking teams or one of the better looking teams in the NFL right now. The Rams also in conversation for being one of the better looking teams in the NFL right now. There's a lot of teams that look insanely good going into this postseason. Buffalo is definitely one of those teams. I would say teams that look really, really good and would have the best odds of winning the Super Bowl right now with what we've seen over the past few months. I'd say on the AFC side, Baltimore, Buffalo, Cleveland probably would be my top 3. I would say Houston, maybe if C.J. Stroud's playing C.J. Stroud football, I'd say Houston can easily be in that conversation as well. NFC side, I'm saying San Francisco, I'm saying L.A. Call me crazy, I'm saying Dallas. I think they've looked really, really good so far this year as well. Detroit can maybe be in that conversation too. So just taking a look at all of these teams in the NFL right now, I think Buffalo, when I listed off a ton of teams, I would definitely say Buffalo is either 1 or 2 when it comes to how good and how consistent they've looked over the past month or so of football, because at the time when they were 6-6, I believe they were like the 11 seed, or they were around 11th place in the AFC. Since then, 5 straight wins, and they've jumped up to number 2 in the AFC. Obviously, they jumped from 2 to 6 because they took down Miami, but that's still a massive, massive jump from a month and a half ago, where we saw this Bills team not even really, it wasn't that they weren't in contention, because the AFC wildcard race has been close all season long. Since about the midway point of the year, it has been close all season long. But you just take a look at the fact that Buffalo was so far, at least when it came to the standings, they were so far out to now being AFC East champions, number 2 seed in the AFC. Safe to say this Buffalo Bills team is one of the, if not the hottest teams going into the playoffs right now.
And you know, Matt, we talk about some of the hottest teams heading into the playoffs, and let's talk real quick about some of the most surprising teams entering the playoffs on that AFC side. Obviously, if you were to tell the Texans that they were going to be in the playoffs week 1 of the season, I'm sure that probably wouldn't go over too well. But the Texans, they win the AFC South. They're the 4 seed. And the Pittsburgh Steelers squeaking in as well. And with what they had to deal with at the quarterback position, obviously Kenny Pickett did not have a great season. Then he got hurt. They went to Mitch Trubisky. They lose back-to-back games against the Patriots and the Cardinals, 2 of the worst teams in the entire National Football League. They did that back in, I believe, early December. So when you look at what Pittsburgh went through when they lost those games, everybody counted them out. But then here comes Mason Rudolph out of everybody. Mason Rudolph out of everybody to lead the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs. And Mason Rudolph has looked tremendous this season. And Matt, I'm very certain that should really spark a conversation in the city of Pittsburgh on who is your guy moving forward into next season as well. Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? Is it going to be Mason Rudolph with how he's been able to play at the end of the season? Because the way Mason Rudolph's been able to play at the end of the season, he's played like one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. And that should not go unnoticed. So Pittsburgh, they're in the playoffs. I say you ride the hot hand, which is Mason Rudolph. But, man, there's a lot of conversations right now that's going to be going on in Pittsburgh, whether or not over time. Who's the man for the franchise? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett next year? Is it going to be Mason Rudolph next year? Or do they go elsewhere and do they look into the draft? Because the draft, once again, loaded with quarterback talent.
Yeah, I would say for Pittsburgh, obviously, there's huge question marks once the season comes to a close at whatever point that may be, whether it's the wild card, the divisional, the AFC championship, or maybe even the Super Bowl if we see the Steelers somehow make it there. But I would say what you mentioned when it comes down to the quarterback position after this season, that's definitely one of the bigger question marks for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The defense has been elite all season long. You cannot take that away from the Pittsburgh Steelers. The offense at points this year has looked atrocious on the football field, but the defense has been the anchor for this team all season long, and that's what I'm excited to see for them playing against Buffalo. You've got 2 insanely talented defenses on the Buffalo Bills side of the football and the Pittsburgh Steelers side of the football. The question is going to be, is Josh Allen going to make plays? Or is Mason Rudolph, if he ends up being the quarterback who starts for the Steelers, who, in my personal opinion, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers should take a book out of the Cleveland Browns playbook, and if a quarterback starts absolutely tearing it up, you start him. Talk about Joe Flacco. So for Pittsburgh, I think you give the nod to Mason Rudolph. He's proven it so far in the later stages of this season that if there's anybody that's going to bring this team success in the playoffs, it's the man named Mason Rudolph. But that's the one thing between the Steelers and the Buffalo Bills I'm looking forward to. I'm looking to see which defense is going to play the best football on that field, because I feel like it could be a defensive matchup between both of these two teams, and it's going to be whichever defense. I'm not saying they have to score points, but whichever defense gives their offense the best starting or the best field position, I think that's going to be the winner of this game. Whichever defense decides to play the best.
First team out in the AFC, the Cincinnati Bengals. They would have been the 8th seed. And Matt, we talked about the Bengals. They chose a bad year to go 9-8 because mainly 9-8 gets you into the playoffs. It has in years past, but this season, with how loaded the AFC is, you had to be 10-7 to make it into the playoffs. So the AFC is certainly a gauntlet, Matt. And of course, real quick before we go to break, you have to feel for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Jaguar fans. If you're down in Jacksonville, Jaguar fans, we're here for you. We love you. We care for you. And
Be mad at me. Be mad at me, if anything.
Don't do anything you would regret, because Jacksonville, they started off the year 8-3, and actually they could probably blame me because we talk about the announcers jinx. And when they were playing and when they were 8-3, I went out there and said, and it wasn't just me, there were a lot of people that said this, that they looked like a Super Bowl contending team. They finished 9-8 and missed the playoffs. That's tough. That's such a tough season for Jacksonville. They're going to be back. That was a team that down the stretch of the season, again, just like the entire story for the NFL this season, second half of the season, down the stretch, the Jaguars got completely banged up. Trevor Lawrence was dealing with not just one, not just two, but 3 different injuries he was trying to play through. There's not a doubt in my mind. The Jaguars will be back, just like the Bengals. They're going to be back in that conversation once again next season. Time for a break. We're talking the NFC coming up next when we return.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud? Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Just another reminder, folks, we are live in the chat, so make sure to drop your comments, complaints, criticism, the whole 9 yards. We're talking the NFL playoffs. Let's shift focus on over to the NFC. We're talking about the college football and the national championship coming up here just a little bit on this show. Matt, let's go and let's talk real quick about the NFC before we go into the college football talk and the national championship coming up tonight between Washington and Michigan. 1 seed, the San Francisco 49ers. They're going to get a week's rest. The 2 seed, the Dallas Cowboys. 3 seed, I'll go with matchups. Sorry about that, folks. The Dallas Cowboys, the 2 seed, will take on the Green Bay Packers, the 7 seed. The 3 seed, the Detroit Lions, will take on the 6 seed, the LA Rams. And the 5 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles, takes a trip to visit the 4 seed, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Matt, a lot of storylines when you look at the NFC. When you look at the NFC, Matt, I think that the best game of the entire playoffs is going to be between the Detroit Lions and the Los Angeles Rams. You have Matthew Stafford's return to Detroit. So that should certainly be interesting. I think that game's going to be the best game that we see all weekend. Storyline, that 7 seed, the Green Bay Packers. Maybe a bit of a surprise to see them squeak in as the 7 seed, especially after starting off the season 2-5, 3-6 as well. So the Packers, this was a team that had to start winning games in the second half of the season, and Jordan Love has looked magnificent that second half of the year, a night and day difference since the first half of the season. And Matt, probably the most underrated team in all of the National Football League. And I'm saying this because this is a team that is always usually overhyped. And I feel like people have just gotten tired of trying to overhype this team. This is a team that every single year is shouting, "This is our year." And Matt, I know who I'm talking about.
I was thinking you were going to say Tampa Bay, but now I'm looking at the 2 seed in the NFC, and that's who I'm looking at now.
Every year, the players, the fans are saying, "This is our year. This is our year." They limp into the playoffs, and they get bounced in the first or second round by the San Francisco 49ers. Good news here. If they're going to get bounced by the 49ers, it would have to be in the NFC Championship game. But Matt, no, on a real note, this very well may be the Dallas Cowboys year. And I think that in recent memory, this is the best Cowboys team that we've seen. The Cowboys have been able to dominate their opponents left and right. We talk about beating inferior opponents, how they should beat them. That's exactly what the Dallas Cowboys have done this season. They've beaten opponents how they should beat them. And then on top of that, they've beaten some really good opponents as well. So you look at the Dallas Cowboys and what they bring to the table. Matt, I know every single year I know it's a meme that goes around all of social media. It's a joke that goes around the NFL. Every single year, the Dallas Cowboys, they always say this is their year. One of those years, they're going to get that saying right. Matt, it may be this season. This is the best Dallas Cowboys team that we've seen in recent memory.
So you're telling me the Madden simulations for the playoffs actually might be right this year and having the Cowboys winning it every single season?
It's always the Cowboys and the Browns.
For me, it's not the Browns.
It's always the Browns for me.
Whenever I do the sim, it's always Dallas and Kansas City.
They're up there too.
Those are like the only games I get.
You know what's funny?
When it comes to simming to the Super Bowl.
You know what's funny? I know we're getting off topic here, but a couple of weeks ago, I was simulating a season on Madden. It was Madden 23.
Let me guess. Let me take a guess. Did you have like the Falcons versus, for some reason, I was going to say Falcons, Bears.
It was the Bengals' exact path and the exact path of last year's playoffs. The Bengals beat the Ravens in the wild card. They beat the Bills in the divisional. They lost to Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, except the game was played in Cincinnati. And then the Chiefs beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. That was the Madden sim. What are the odds?
That's pretty funny.
Nonetheless, we're getting sidetracked. I'm getting sidetracked. But Matt, you're the cause of that.
I brought it. Yeah, I started it.
It's my birthday. You're the cause of that.
Well, I technically did start it because I brought up the fact that every year Madden sim, you have the Cowboys winning or being in the Super Bowl.
This may be the Cowboys' year. And I honestly, when I say this, the Dallas Cowboys, this is the best team that they've had in recent memory. And you could just tell from what they've been able to do so far this season. I mean, Matt, you take a look at their schedule. You look at who they've played. A big win over Washington yesterday. They're 12-5 on the season. Matt, yeah, they lost big to the Bills, but the Bills, they were on a mission. They lost to the Dolphins in a very close game. They come back. They beat the Lions. Matt, they beat the Eagles this season, 33-13. The first time they played them, they lost by 5. This is a team that, yes, they have some glaring losses on their schedule, But you look at the second half of the season, and again, yes, some big wins against some inferior opponents, but what do great teams do, Matt? They beat teams how they're supposed to beat them. That's exactly what the Cowboys have done this season. I'm not saying that the Cowboys are my favorite to win the Super Bowl this season, but I do think that this is a team that can make a run in the playoffs. My predictions for the entire playoffs, and I know this is cliche because they're both the number 1 seed, but you look at the Super Bowl logo, Matt. No, in reality, I think that the Ravens and the 49ers are the 2 top teams, and I think that they are the 2 best teams in the National Football League, and I do think we will see them in the Super Bowl. That's my opinion, but the Cowboys, they are in that mix, and I do expect them to do better this postseason than what they've done in the past.
And yeah, that's one thing you talk about every single year. It's San Francisco that takes out Dallas. Well, there's another team.
Might be the same way.
There's another team in kind of a very similar pattern.
They play them this week.
Exactly. It has been San Francisco, and the only reason it's is because we haven't been able to see this matchup in a few years. It's San Francisco or Green Bay that knocks Dallas out of the playoffs. So they've got to deal with Green Bay in round number 1. They're not going to be able to play the San Francisco 49ers if they take down Green Bay. But if we see San Francisco versus Dallas in the NFC Championship game, they're going to have to play the 49ers. So this Dallas team, you said that it's by far one of the best Dallas teams we've seen in recent memory, especially that offensive side. I mean, CeeDee Lamb making a case for one of, if not the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. You take a look at Dak Prescott. I remembered saying, because in our fantasy football league, I brought it up. I'm like, I don't think he's going to turn over the ball as many times as he did last year. He's kind of shied away from turning the football over, which is a good thing as a quarterback. But this Dallas team definitely looks really, really, really good on the offensive side. And that's not even with me mentioning Ferguson, the tight end, not even mentioning Brandon Cooks, who continues to go to different teams and continues to make impact wherever he goes, it seems like. But this Dallas team definitely looks like a team that should play well in the playoffs. The reason I say should is because they've had teams in the past few years that should have played good, or on paper you look at the team and you think, yeah, this team can make it to the Super Bowl. This Dallas Cowboys roster should be able to play good in the postseason. It's just a question of, is the coaching going to be right? And are the players going to be able to play good in the postseason? Because it's postseason football. You're going to get everybody's best every single game you play.
Matt, when you look at the NFL playoffs this year, there are a lot of great storylines. Of course, you have Tyreek Hill, his return to Kansas City. If Cleveland wins, there's a possible chance we could see Joe Flacco going up against his former team, the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Mike McCarthy, the head coach for the Cowboys, going up against his former team, the Green Bay Packers, who beat the Cowboys during all those years. Of course, Matthew Stafford and his return to Detroit. So a lot of great storylines coming up this weekend across the National Football League and Super Wild Card Weekend. I'm looking forward to it. But Matt, it is time for a break. When we return, we'll shift our focus to college football, because the national championship is to be played tonight between number 1 Michigan and number 2 Washington. That's all up next on Sports Now.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud? Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Matt, we talk about how late we are in the football season, a football season that it just seems has completely flown by. And Matt, we will wrap up yet another year of college football tonight. Number 1, Michigan going up against number 2, Washington. Michigan in the Big Ten. Washington going to be in the Big Ten next season. They're finishing out their last game as a Pac-12 school. Matt, not to mention, this is the last game in college football before we go to the 12-team playoff format that starts next year. Matt, and we talk about Michigan and Washington. And it's not the regulars. You don't have Alabama. You don't have Clemson. You don't have Georgia. You don't have some of the top teams that have been on the top and playing for the national championships over the last couple of years. Matt, I could not ask for a better national championship to wrap up the 4-team playoff format, to wrap up college football as we currently know it, because it's going to be completely revamped next season. And Matt, I could not ask for a better matchup, because with these two schools, they haven't been in the national championship in quite some time. It's frankly just good for the game.
And yeah, how about the one thing, and it's really I wouldn't say it's the only thing I like about this game, but everybody gives crap to the Big Ten, saying that when it comes to football, the Big Ten's terrible. They're nowhere near as good as the SEC. How about the final college football playoff with the 4-team format? Being 2, obviously Washington's not a Big Ten team this year, but it's between 2 Big Ten teams in the national championship game. I would have liked the U of M team to be Ohio State, obviously, because I'm a Buckeyes fan, but still, everybody gives crap and talks about the Big Ten is not good for football. They're not good in a lot of different sports. The final national championship in the 4-team format's 2 Big Ten teams. Washington, obviously, not yet a Big Ten team, but we'll be saying they're a Big Ten team. Would it be official after tonight? I don't know when it's official, but here in about a month or two, if not already, immediately after the game tonight, Washington's a Big Ten football team. So it's going to be between essentially not exactly 2 Big Ten teams, but it's pretty much 2 Big Ten teams in the national championship.
And Matt, both teams are coming in with some high-powered offenses. Obviously, Michael Penix was a Heisman candidate. He was a finalist for the Heisman running. The season that he's been able to put together so far this season, averaging 325 yards per game. He's thrown for over 4,000 yards, 33 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. J.J. McCarthy was banged up during the regular season. He has less numbers, but as we mentioned on the show a lot last week, J.J. McCarthy is the type of guy that when Michigan needs somebody to step up and make a play, J.J. McCarthy is that go-to guy, and he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks in college football. This matchup is going to be absolutely tremendous. Obviously, Michael Penix has a pass because he beat Michigan when he was at Indiana, beat them 38-21. I believe that was the 2020 season. It was COVID year. So, Matt, when you look at what Washington brings to the table, their defense was able to step up against Texas. Michigan, their defense was able to step up against Alabama, make plays down the stretch. And Michigan, they had to grind out their win. And I'm not saying Washington didn't either, but Michigan, they were behind in that game. They were down behind by 7 heading into the final 3 minutes of that game. So Michigan, that's a team that had to consistently grind. They got that win. Washington, close one against Texas. This one I think is going to be a great game. And I really think this game is going to be decided on whichever defense makes more plays down the stretch.
And yeah, you take a look at both of these teams, their paths to the national championship. Obviously, both of the teams as a whole this season, it's safe to say you wouldn't want the final 4-team playoff to come down to any other matchup. There's going to be one team at the end of the year that will be undefeated. There will be no other team in this college football season that will end the year undefeated, whether it be Michigan or whether it be Washington, there will be no other teams that are undefeated at the end of the regular season. Or not at the end of the regular season, at the end of the season as a whole. So taking a look at Michigan versus Washington, obviously both teams 14-0 going into the game tonight. But you take a look at, and you mentioned the fact that Michigan had to claw from behind against Alabama. Washington, they just had to hold Texas off long enough. They were up it was a 2-possession game for a majority of the fourth quarter, but a later field goal in the game in the last minute, 109 left to go in the game. We saw Texas get a field goal, then they got the ball back, and then ended up coming up just short to move on to the national championship. So taking a look at both of these two teams, Washington, we talked about the question mark being that defense. How good was that defense going to do against Texas? Well, in the early stages of the game, they did enough to give themselves what ended up being a comfortable enough lead to win the game. Michigan, they had to claw their way back against Alabama. So it's going to be a tale of two different teams, two different games played in the college football playoff semifinals, and it'll be fun to see how this game plays out tonight.
More of it coming up next. When we return, we'll have all our predictions and more coming up next to wrap up our show on Sports Now. We'll be back in just a few moments.
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
We welcome you back here to Sports Now. We're talking about the national championship for college football. Michigan and Washington coming up later tonight. Matt, score prediction, your thoughts. What do both teams need to do to get out of here, get out tonight with not only a win, but a national championship trophy?
Well, for Michigan, they've just got to play their style of football. We've talked about multiple different times on this show how, and I even said it myself, this Michigan team, when you look at the players on paper, this is by far one of the best Michigan teams that has ever taken the football field with what players on both the offense and defensive sides have been able to accomplish. For Washington, you've got to get that offense rolling. Michigan, the best defense so far this season in college football. You've got in Washington one of the better offenses that we've seen in college football so far this season. There have been moments where it's been inconsistent, but 37 points against Texas in the college football playoff semifinals, that tells you all you need to know. And then also high-scoring wins against Oregon twice during the season. That tells you all you need to know about how good this Washington offense is. But they play a very tough Michigan defense. The Washington Huskies, they've got to get the offense going if they want to come out on top tonight. For me, I'll tell you who I want to see win, and then I'll tell you who I actually think is going to win. I really want to see Washington win because I'm a diehard Buckeye fan, and I don't want to see Michigan win a national championship. Who do I think is going to win? The Michigan Wolverines. I think the final score, I think Michigan's going to win it. I think it's going to be actually a pretty convincing win. I'm going to say 30-13 final score, but I think the Wolverines are going to come out on top this year.
You know, I love Washington's offense, and I'm not concerned with their offense going up against Michigan's defense. I'm concerned with Washington's defense going up against Michigan's offense. Washington's defense, a very underrated defense this season. They were good. They proved that in the semifinal game against Texas, who had one of the top offenses in the nation. But when you have J.J. McCarthy slinging the football around and the Blake Corum that's on the ground, I've said it once on this show, this is Michigan's national championship to lose. This is the best year that Michigan has a chance to pull in the national championship. Matt, I'll go out there and say it right now. I think Michigan wins it. If Washington wants to win it, they're going to have to rely on their defense to make plays, and that offense is going to have to stay high-powered. I think Michigan's defense, especially their front, their box seven and their defensive line, proved that to me against a very good Alabama offensive line last Monday. I think that Michigan's defense is legit. I think that they're scary. I think that they make more plays than Washington's defense. I'm going to go Michigan in this one, 38-28. I think it'll be a good game until about 3 minutes left, where I think Michigan will kick a field goal to put it out of reach. Michigan wins at 38-28 over Washington and the Huskies. Nonetheless, it'll be a great game, but alongside Matthew Pennington, I'm Jackson Lightcap, our producer, Kevin Fowler. Thanks for joining us on Sports Now, and thanks for dealing with us. We'll talk to you tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.